Like I said, all the guys, it's not me that's getting in USA and having the big contract, but I get as much joy from seeing these guys getting in.
Have you actually been on the mat, right, or on the court or on the field and done the hours to get good?
I believe that we're on the threshold of one of the greatest transformations in biomedical science that we'll ever see.
And you've got to be in the right place at the right time, but if you're not physically or mentally ready, then it doesn't matter if that right time and place come or not. You have to be ready.
And I think that's always the case. People don't like the resources, they lack the resourcefulness.
There's a 120 millimeter rocket that slammed into the side of the building.
Welcome back to Breaking the Norm. In this episode we have Daniel Dimmock. Dan is an immunologist specialising in the lung area, and in this episode we go through the vaccines that are currently being developed, conspiracy theories, and what he's currently researching. At times in the podcast, the science can get a little bit complicated, but stick with it because you'll get the general gist as we go through. Lastly, if you're wondering what on earth that is on my lip, it's for Movember and it will be coming off as soon as possible. Enjoy. Dan, thanks for coming on. I wanted to get Dan on basically because he's my go-to guy for anything to do with science that I don't understand, puts it in layman's terms. Dan, can you give us an introduction to your background?
Yeah, so I'm an academic associate. I'm at Trent, so that's a joint teaching and joint PhD research position. So my PhD side's in immunology of the lung, but looking at how microRNAs, so they're small RNA sections, can activate these viral sensing RNA receptors in the immune system in the lung. And we'll get into that fully.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to get into what that means, because that's just gone straight over my head. But basically, it sounds quite close, especially in the lung, probably quite well linked to what we're going to go down the rabbit hole with COVID and stuff. So I'll start off with this COVID situation. Obviously, news of a vaccine. What's your thoughts on that? And then we'll go into the wider pandemic in general. So what's your thoughts on the current vaccine? How does it work? What is it? Are we all going to die?
Yes. So hopefully we won't all die. But no. Yeah, so I'm really excited about these. So they're an mRNA vaccine. They're brand new. It's a new technology, but it's actually like quite safe. And so I'll go into what we call a central dogma, because to understand what mRNA is, you kind of need to understand how proteins are made and how genes are translated. So a gene is a DNA section for a particular protein. To translate into a protein, you create like a copy called the messenger RNA. And then the messenger RNA comes out of the nucleus of the cell, goes to the ribosomes and gets converted into a protein. So what these messenger RNA vaccines are doing is we target the proteins of the virus, so we can pick specific targets on the virus, create the messenger RNA to make that protein, and then inject it into the cell. So the cell then makes that part of the virus without the rest of this kind of infectious virus. So the cell makes its own the protein that you've injected into.
So is a theory that they give you this safe bit, in theory, your body creates antibodies that will defend against the whole of it?
Yeah, so an antibody only ever targets a part of a virus or a part of a protein. So that's called the target's the epitope of a protein. So we can select, there's different proteins on the surface of the virus. So there's a spike one. There's also like, there's an E protein and M protein. We just give them like different names, but the main one's the spike protein. So this spike protein is what gets the virus inside of the cell. So it attaches to the target cell, and then it basically allows it to be internalized, because viruses are a lot smaller than cells.
Okay.
So they need to be taken inside the cell where they replicate. So the spike protein is what we're targeting, because luckily from SARS and MERS studies, they kind of already saw, because they're related to COVID, they saw that the spike's the most important target for antibodies. So all the vaccines we developed this year, most of them were looking at the spike protein, because that's the one we know that's effective to create antibodies against. So they've selected that, picked the messenger RNA, so the code for the spike protein, and then that's the target we've got.
So they've sort of, because I've had quite a lot of people are basically saying this vaccine's come around too quick, I'm not taking it, all that stuff. They're trying to kill us. We'll get onto the conspiracies later on about being tracked, even though we all carry around a mobile phone which constantly tracks us. But anyway, so the vaccine, it come around so quick in theory because I'm guessing, one, they've thrown so many people at this, and two, but what it sounds like is they'd already identified a route for this type of vaccine in previous viruses. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we already had an idea of what we needed to target based on studying SARS and MERS. The delivery systems for these, so the mRNA, so the messenger RNA, it's not very stable outside of cells, so it gets degraded quickly. So we need a way to deliver it, and the delivery systems have been tested and were shown to be safe. And with what you're doing with the messenger RNA is you're only ever expressing a part of the virus anyway. So the likelihood, as long as the delivery system seems quite safe, like this isn't an absolute because you still have to test it, but it is, the risk is a lot less, because as long as the delivery system to like envelope the messenger RNA so it's stable, deliver it to the target cell. As long as that bit's safe, the likelihood of the messenger RNA creating a protein that could cause any more side effects than the virus itself is really, really small.
Yeah, because that's what I'm thinking is, I'm quite skeptical of a lot of things. We'll get onto it later, but the risk of COVID, I'd probably rather take the risk of the side effects of a vaccine, which so far seem to be headaches and things, than the risk of getting COVID or giving COVID to my family. But I want to talk about the side effects as well. So I know in the one study, I think I messaged you about this a while ago. So there was spinal inflammation, but I think that person had undiagnosed MS to start with, didn't they? Something similar?
Yeah. So they had MS, and things like this do come up. People, especially in big wide trials, people get naturally sick from other things. But they still have to, they can't just presume that it was MS. They have to stop the trial and investigate, make sure it wasn't because of the vaccine, or find the root cause of why that happened.
I think it doesn't help with the sensationalist media as well, because I think it was in Brazil, someone died during a trial from something unrelated. And then I think it was all just someone's died during the trial and everyone's like, look what this vaccine's doing to you. But as far as the vaccine goes, like the way you just explained it still confuses me. So I get people, I see it online and people are saying, oh, tell us what's in it. But the thing is, we wouldn't have a clue what it is anyway. It's like, I suppose the experts are paid to do this. And then obviously you don't want to have blind faith in people because some pharmaceutical companies aren't very ethical. But for this to be as bad as a lot of people make out, you'd have to have people all the way down the chain, all the way from the labs to the CEO involved, would you not?
Yeah. You'd have to have so many people in on it. So have you ever heard of Occam's razor?
I have, but explain it.
So the kind of philosophical idea that it's normally the simplest explanation to a problem is the likelihood of that's probably the real one. So rather than like, say with 9/11,
we're off down
the idea. Yeah, I go. But like the idea that thousands of people work together to put like bombs in there and manage to keep it all a secret and all this, like there's so many working parts to that theory that have to go together.
Can't, like the government couldn't keep lockdown a secret. The brief got leaked within like a couple of days.
Yeah.
You see that all the time. The thing I want to get back to a couple of points about the vaccine because I've written them down. But while we're on it, like people, I was saying to my friend the other day on the phone, people are on one hand are saying this government's incompetent and can't plan anything, probably correct. On the other hand, they're saying they're mastermind criminals that are involved in this brain control conspiracy, and it's like you can't have both. They can't be both at the same time. So, but so it's looking quite promising on the vaccine front. But why do we need the vaccine? Like some people are saying this is nothing worse than the flu, which I get to a certain extent when you look at total numbers, but I'm guessing if the lockdown wasn't put in, then this could have been a lot worse. Why is this virus different? How does it work, and why should people be wary of it?
Yeah, so we've got quite a few studies now looking at deaths, and you can just look at how many deaths we've had in the country, like 50,000 officially, around over 70,000 excess deaths, so more than the average for the year. That's way more than a flu. The IFR, so the infection fatality rate, if you take loads of different studies, is around 0.3%, which is about 10 times higher than the flu. The problem is as well, IFRs are calculated based upon full healthcare resource and access to ventilators. And this is where the big problem is like healthcare capacity, really.
Yeah, because I guess we've got beds, like they've built these Nightingales all over the country, but I don't think we've got the staff or the expertise to man them.
No, yeah. So an intensive care unit is exactly that. It's intensive. They require, like, from what I understand, like, and I've read a bit of clinical stuff, but like one nurse can look after like 2-3 intensive care.
My sister's an intensive care nurse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it is intense. Like she tells us some stuff, and they're literally running across to people. Like these guys, it's not just a case of someone's just chilling on a ventilator. Like there's a lot going on to try and keep people alive. And then you've got one person crashing, you're running back, and it takes a while to train these people. So I suppose even if we have the beds, you haven't got the staff to keep the people alive on the beds.
Yeah, and also if you have a high community valence, the nurses start getting it out, either in the hospital or outside, and then that brings down your amount of available workers, because you don't want nurses going in positive and like being infectious on it.
So we were saying this is a lot more contagious and infectious. Is it just I got very limited science knowledge? Is it just because the virus replicates itself so quickly? What is it?
Yeah, so there's a few factors. It's quite a big part is like with flus, there's a certain level of immunity within the population, be it acquired through natural infection, as probably a lot of us already have, young people, or we do vaccinations for flus each year for healthcare workers and the elderly. So there's a level. I think that is a big part of it. It's just
because it's so new. There's no antibodies out there. No one's had it.
Yeah.
Because this is obviously going to come around every year now, isn't it?
Yeah. This will be endemic for quite a while, but with the vaccine being so effective, like not 95%, they've both come out at. That's actually really good in terms of we could probably get it. Dependent on the uptake of the vaccine and how long it lasts, but we could theoretically reduce like the deaths maybe below flu, but also just because as well we'll probably be so active in our vaccination programs and
but the issue measures. Is for a vaccine to work, you need a certain percentage of the population to take it, don't you?
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get based on what I've seen on Facebook anyway. So what's your opinion on lockdown then? Is it needed?
Especially at the start, it was, because people didn't have a clue about what it was doing. There could be long-term health effects, which it looks like there are, but it could have been cancerous, like oncogenic, which causes cancer. there's all these sort of questions. So the first one was definitely needed, especially with how quick it was filling everything up. The second one, I mean, the track and trace should have been a lot better. That was a big thing.
That was an expensive spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Running track and trace off an Excel. Crazy.
Yeah. No, but saying that, the seasonality of this is quite, like, it affects it so much, the weather. And there's not many kind of Western countries doing well. But I suppose Germany, Norway, and Finland are doing quite well. Germany is back into lockdown, but compared to, if you compare them to us, they've done a lot better.
Is that comparative with the populations?
Yeah. That's per capita.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many factors. But to answer your question, yeah.
Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, with lockdown, obviously the more you reduce people's interactions, the less chance it has to spread, the more it brings it down.
Exactly.
And it did seem the strategy was have a look where hospital capacity was nearly hitting full, where they were panicking, and then they were just throwing those areas into tier 3 lockdowns. So like Liverpool, Manchester, because I kind of realised that with Nottingham, we had like the highest rate when all the students came back, but they only threw us into tier 2 because I think they were looking at hospitals, and then once the hospitals started filling up, they threw Nottingham into tier 3, and then they realised it was just happening all around the country. All the hospitals were filled. So then
But I get the hospitals. Obviously, we need to keep the hospitals under capacity because otherwise, obviously, normal things like heart attacks and things won't get treated as well if they're completely full. But do you think there's you've probably got to sit on the fence a bit on this, but do you think there's too much focus from a virologist point of view? So obviously, if you've got these people advising the government, their whole job is to stop the virus spreading, which is what they're going to do. So everything that gets brought in is going to try and control the virus. Just like in my day job, I work on the commercial side. So my focus is on making sure that the costs are down and the contracts are correct. But somebody else on the delivery side, all their targets are set on hitting the delivery targets. So if you've got people that are focused solely on stopping a virus, do you think they're taking into account the wider impacts that could potentially also damage society as a whole? Like, I did some research the other day. The average life expectancy in the poorest areas of this country is 74 years old, and the current average death age of COVID is 82.3, which is above the normal life expectancy anyway. Now, I'm not saying COVID is not dangerous. I'm not saying we shouldn't lock down. I'm saying I can see why people might get frustrated that they're probably being plunged into poverty, wiping years off their life for something that's killing people that are older than their life expectancy already, you know?
Yeah. But with SAGE, so that's the scientific advisory group for emergencies, I think. So they're who advising the government. They're not just, they have epidemiologists, but they also have like cancer experts. They have all the health side, but the government's they've definitely got economic advisors who are just.
I know that, but I mean from a political point of view. So they've got these advisors, but all you see on the news is death rate, and that's all they're going to try and control in theory, isn't it? Deaths and cases, because that's what the politics is almost driven by. I don't know whether there's just too much. I can see why people are reluctant to listen if they're on minimum wage, losing their job, being put onto, what was it, 60%, the latest one, of what they were earning, or job seekers, so you'd have families ending up in bed sits. I do see why it's difficult, but I know there's got to be a balance. I just think... Yeah,
but those things you can remedy with economic measures. So like the furlough scheme was good. Well, it's good. It's still going. Universal basic incomes. You could trial for a bit. It'd be a good chance, really, to trial something like that. I don't
think that's ever going to happen in this country with the way
not this government, no. But they might be forced to, because there is like the economic arguments for it, and it does seem to have a good benefit. Maybe there's certain. They've said they're not going to do austerity to recover from this, so maybe they've learned from the last time. But then again, they could be lying, and they probably are lying.
Well, I suppose the issue is that to recover, you need people to spend money, and you need the economy to grow. And if you go that route, people aren't going to spend money. It's the same I saw people saying about, they're going to have to increase taxes. But if anything, I think they'll probably actually cut VAT to increase spending. They need people to get out and spend money. So I think it's obviously a very difficult position to be in. But with the arguments I was just putting across then, being devil's advocate, I've seen quite a lot on Facebook of people just claiming this doesn't exist. Now, I know me and you both, we both trained, how we met was we both trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a very close contact sport. I've not been back yet because I just simply don't know enough about this. And I think everyone should be allowed to take their own risks. I just don't know enough, and I'd rather train in pods. But I see a lot of people just say this doesn't exist. What would you say to try and convince people that we need the vaccine and basically they're wrong?
So obviously education, just trying to, they're getting their information. People who actually don't believe it exists at all, I actually think that is quite a fringe. It's more like the people in the middle who question
So they know it exists. They don't think it's bad.
Yeah. I think that's the main kind of worry.
But
yeah,
I think
people who don't.
Sorry, go on, mate. There's a bit of a lag here, so I keep not realising when you're about to go. Go on.
I was just thinking, like, when people are that extreme, it's quite hard. That they need deprogramming. Same with, I want to talk about it in a minute, but same with flat Earth.
Yeah.
Or geocentrism, where they believe that Earth's the centre of the solar system. Things like that. They've rejected most modern science and reality, and you've got to find out why they've done that.
But I think people get switched off though, and I can see why it happens is because, first of all, people think there's different, research to you. You're doing a PhD and you're teaching science students at uni. Your level of research is a lot different to someone who thinks they're researching but they're not. So obviously you'll look at peer-reviewed studies and things like that, and there's evidence-based, it's all cited and you've got the sources. Whereas I was watching a thing the other day, and I don't think people mean it. They've obviously got something in their head that the world's against them, and they'll fight. So there's a woman that had got the box of one of the AstraZeneca vaccines, and she Googled the ingredients, and she'd got it up, and I think I messaged you about it. One of the ingredients was first found in a 14-week-old fetus baby, but that's how it was first found. There's not a production line of 14-week-old fetuses getting mashed up for vaccines. It's replicated in laboratory environments. But she's just gone on Wikipedia and seen this thing and been like, oh my God. And she obviously doesn't realise she doesn't know how to interpret that. And then that spreads like wildfire around the internet and just fuels all these conspiracies over and over again.
Yeah. I guess with her case, though, there's people have these kind of beliefs of mistrust, and because you can't educate everyone on what recombinant DNA or recombinant RNA or the concepts of that. But what we could do is try and tackle at a society-wide level mistrust and try and understand the reasons why people go against them. So there's a conspiracy that goes around, a video that I saw that kind of lists all of Pfizer's kind of shady things it's ever done in the past, which it's got numerous. It's done loads of bad things in the past, but a lot of them aren't so much to do with explicitly dangerous things that have gone past all the scientists. It's more the company has advertised it for off-brand to garner money, and this is a problem. It's big money in pharma, especially in America. especially in America. But I was thinking with that video of like listing all the things Pfizer does, I was thinking of making it actually, doing one for McDonald's and having the scary music and then being like, so you'll put a burger in your mouth from these guys who destroy the rainforest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the one thing that annoys me is, and this is on probably other people that are anti-lockdown and things will agree, is you've got a lot of people that never once cared about their health. They'd eat themselves into an early grave, smoke themselves into an early grave, drink, increase their risk of cancer tenfold, Alzheimer's, everything. They increase their risks for everything. But now it's out of their control. They're having a meltdown. And I'm hoping that'll be one of the good things to come out of this, is that maybe they realise that they've got to look after themselves as well. There was that meme of somebody like that was severely out of shape shouting at a kid that was playing football for risking her health and stuff, and it was just like, I was just like, that is what's happening at the moment. But I think with the conspiracy theories, like you've got quite a few, like Johnson & Johnson, another example, not a very good company. They've lost a big lawsuit to do with talcum powder. They were mining it next to arsenic reserves, so people were getting ill, and they lost that. And there are some unethical things they do, but it doesn't mean that everything that big pharma does is wrong. Like a lot of us have probably been saved using stuff from big pharma, you know.
Yeah.
But people just focus on the small things. So Bill Gates, I think he saved so many people. He could just go and sit on a beach and retire and not do anything for the rest of his life, but he's trying to do good things. And there's a case in one of the countries where there are a few cases of polio caused by the vaccine.
Yeah.
And people get that little clip and then they'll say, oh, look, they're purposely infecting people. And it's like, well, if you save millions and maybe accidentally infect 100, is that good or is that bad?
Yeah. That's another, this is why we need to teach philosophy at schools, is like, so that's a concept of utilitarianism.
Yeah,
it's
exactly,
like taking the decision that causes the least amount of harm. It doesn't cause no harm at all. But if you have a drug that causes like 1 in 10,000 deaths against a disease that causes like 1 in 100 deaths, it's a no-brainer.
It's the same. What's the thing they used to describe utilitarianism? You're on a train on a track, and you're gonna hit, say, 10 people, or you can turn off the track and kill 5. Which do you choose? You'd obviously have to choose the 5 in theory, even though you play a part in that. But I just think I can see why things get cut up. So there's another one about Bill Gates talking about population control, and everyone's like, look, he wants to control the population. I'm like, yeah, but so does David Attenborough, and we don't want to go after David Attenborough, you know?
No.
It's just people get snippets and then it's sensationalized and it gets put into echo chambers where everyone just hears their own thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. That was what I was going to say with the trolley and utilitarianism and kind of medicine. It is true though that we're not fully utilitarian in medicine. We do kind of, there's certain procedures. So a good one would be organ transplants. So it might be that 5 people are waiting on organs. The best thing that you could do to save 5 lives would be to kill 1 person and get all their fresh organs. So to a level, we're not, medicine isn't fully utilitarian. We do actually consider the procedure as well. It is, yeah.
But as far as vaccines go, you've got, like with the current vaccine that's there, I just don't understand. I'd be skeptical of just taking something that has just come about so quick. But the reason it's come about so quick is because the amount of people, and like you say, they already had it, basically the background to build upon. And I just think the downside to taking it is you might get some headaches. What else is there? You might feel sick for a bit. Something else. You're not being controlled. You carry around a bloody phone with you every day that tracks exactly where you've been. They don't want to know where Deborah's been between the hours of 3 and 5. Bill Gates couldn't care less. I just think there seems to be a thing like where people like to think the world's against them and that there's some massive group of people in control, whereas really it's all just chaos.
Yeah. So yeah, this is where. So I'm working on my theory of conspiratorial epidemiology, is what I'm calling it.
What's that? What's that in plain English?
So epidemiology is the study of how diseases come about, how they spread, public health measures to kind of prevent them, and yeah, like who's vulnerable. So this idea is that conspiracies should be taken seriously within public health and monitored in the same way as we do with diseases. And like the more I think about it, there's a lot of parallels between conspiracies and viruses. And yeah, so like how they spread's an obvious one. It spreads exponentially. So one person will share it to like 4 people, and then so on and so forth till you got thousands of people believing it. There's a concept in epidemiology called K number, and that's a measure of how much that particular disease is spread by super spreaders. So most of the infections are actually driven by a small amount of people, be it because they don't follow restrictions, but there's also like they just put out a lot more virus. So I think it's around 10% of people drive 80% of infections. I think you can apply that same principle of trying to judge different conspiracies on if they have, like cults all have one leader who recruits loads of members. So particularly a conspiracy cult, QAnon. So I'll delve into that in a bit. But that's got one guy, well, one or several different anonymous sources who post and recruit. But then there's influencers, so QAnon influencers who also recruit. But things like anti-vaccination movements, they'd have what we call a higher K number, because those are spread more evenly. So they're spread on by everyone. There's not so many like prominent single anti-vax kind of recruiters. So I think if you were taking this seriously as an epidemiology, you could rank different conspiracies on like who's spreading them. And then in infectious disease epidemiology, that'll change how you tackle that disease. So we try and identify super spreaders, why they become super spreaders, and then enact public health measures against them. So I think in conspiracy, if you could do the same with conspiracies, is like identify super spreaders, try and understand like what we can do to stop them spreading it.
I think the issue then is though that you feed. I agree, but then if you shut people down, you feed into that narrative that there's a conspiracy to stop them spreading the truth, and then it just gets stronger and stronger. And there's a bit of I think the issue with the anti-vaxxers is their conspiracies have a direct impact on everybody else, because
so this is where we measure what we call virulence. So virulence in viruses or infectious diseases is a measure of how much damage they cause, either to the body or like healthcare systems. Most conspiracies, the same way with most viruses, most respiratory viruses are benign. We let the cold spread, we let the flu, like generally there's a few measures against the flu, but common colds we let it rip kind of thing. And most sort of conspiracies around, say something like the moon landed isn't a very virulent conspiracy. There's not so many real world harms that come from someone believing that. But if I was an epidemiologist and I was looking at anti-vax, so that's got more implications. So you take the same way you would with a virus, you take more public health measures against ones that cause harm. So you could measure different types of harm, like whether it inspires people to violence. Certain conspiracies do. Whether they don't engage in public health or take vaccines, that's another harm. whether people isolate themselves from their families, because some conspiracies like encourage that of like cutting yourself off from others. Yeah, there's so many parallels. I'm like writing
That's
this.
actually quite a good thing to link together. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I like so another one is with strains. So where you have coronaviruses, you have flus. There's different strains that pop up. So you have different strains within those species. With conspiracies throughout history, there's some really common ones that kind of prey on our kind of innate psychological fears. So QAnon is the big one at the moment. There's a lot to it, but at its core is there's an idea, there's a shadowy kind of puppet masters of satanic child pedophiles who harvest children for satanic rituals and drink their blood to get special powers. Now, it's a bit of like there's loads of other conspiracies in there, and the idea is that Donald Trump is locked in like an eternal battle of good versus evil against this battle of evil satanic people. It's normally just Donald Trump's political opponents, so like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Epstein, because they've always got a grain of truth to a conspiracy, and like obviously with what Epstein did.
Well, this is the danger, though, isn't it? Because you've got two parties. You've got people that say anyone that believes in any conspiracy is a tin foil hat wearing nut job, and then you've got any other group that will believe any possible conspiracy that exists. And the truth's probably somewhere in the middle, in the fact that like. So let's pick an example of. I know there was an island where people went to, Epstein's Island. Pedos did go out there, but if you said that before that all got found out, I'm like, what do you mean there's an island where all these rich people go and sleep with underage kids? You know, everyone think you're a nutter. So then, because that's happened, or because a few other ones have happened, I know certain people have authorized false flag attacks that didn't happen, things like that. Because they found a few that did happen, they think that means that every conspiracy theory they can think of is real.
Yeah.
And it's just fueling it, I think. But then on the other side, you've got people that deny anything has ever happened, and you've got to take each thing as it comes, I think. But the conspiracy world's just getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like we'll talk about COVID again. For COVID to be a conspiracy of the elite, you've got to have the Chinese elite, the Russian elite, the American elite, all these different elites working with each other if that's all what they want. And that's not what's happening, is it?
No, and they don't want to crash the economy, which is what's happening. They just want everyone working. Yeah, so that one of child abductions and satanic blood rituals is actually really common throughout history. So in the 80s in America, there was something called the Satanic Panic, when cults were. It was kind of a counteract because there was a lot of cults in the 70s, and then Satan. There was like little media stories about Satan worshippers, and some nurse. There was like a kind of child sexual abuse scandal at a nursery, and it just spiraled out of control through all media hype that Satanists were killing children, drinking their blood for rituals. And if you go further back in history, that was one in certain World War I and World War II propaganda, the idea that the Germans, or probably vice versa, they thought about us, were killing children to have their blood for powers or rituals. In medieval England, there's something called the blood libel, which was an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that the Jews were killing children, drinking their blood in rituals, and it led to like the persecution of the Jews for hundreds of years in medieval England. The Romans, when they were persecuting Christians, exactly the same thing, that Christians were killing children and drinking their blood. So this would be a type of a strain of conspiracy that preys on this innate kind of psychological fear, and it mutates to the environment that it's in. So another strain of conspiracy. So say that would be like a flu. Another one is the idea of like something in the air making us sick. So 5G is one. When radio was first invented, people thought that was making them sick. Mobile phone masks, like people say, "Oh, don't have the mobile phone's going to give you like testicular cancer." But even before, when we didn't know how diseases were spread, there was this idea of, they were called miasmas, so they're bad. It's like bad gas, basically, that spreads. And the idea was like just disease spreads by this bad gas. So that's another invisible force that causes illness. So that would be another strain. And then you've got shapeshifters and things like that.
That is such a good parallel to draw. I suppose on the whole conspiracy thing as well, chemtrails, for example, I know loads of people believe in that, but there have been cases by America I read about where people in a certain town started getting more frequent nosebleeds and things like that, and then someone tested the ground and there were higher levels of a certain compound. But that was in a very small area where it could have been government testing out stuff on their own people, or it could have been private company testing out things, you never know. But that doesn't mean that every single chemtrail every single line in the sky is a chemtrail that's trying to poison you, you know?
Yeah.
But some of the other conspiracies then, what have we got? We got moon landings, we've got flat earthers.
Yeah, flat earthers. But those, so that's what I'd class as like more benign, because they're not as dangerous. And then,
but you can't eradicate it.
No.
It's one of those viruses that you can show them the stuff and it just won't disappear.
No. But then you like ultimate dangerous one is kind of Nazism and fascism. The idea that the Jews are ruling the world, and then that you need to do whatever to stop that. So that one originates from something I think is called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which, I mean, anti-Semitic conspiracies have come for years and years. But in Russia, at the start of, it was like 1905 or something, someone said that they'd heard all these, they had like, they knew the plans of what all the Jews wanted to do, and they kind of codified it, saying that they want to rule the world for whatever reason. And the Nazis adopted those from that Russian writing and those beliefs. And Nazism is essentially like a conspiracy at its like most violent and destructive end goal. So that's like the ultimate. That's how bad a conspiracy can get, and it can infect everyone. And I think that's the worry of with QAnon, is it's looking kind of quite violent and quite the idea that the military is going to arrest or kill all your political opponents is quite a worrying one.
Because it's being driven by this. I don't know a lot about Biden. I've seen a few things which I found a bit odd, because where he's copying the speech of the Welsh MP. Have you seen that one?
No.
Honestly, it's word for word the same as the then Labour leader talking about his forefathers down the mines, and Biden's used it about 20 years ago, copying it word for word. So there's things like that I find weird. Is he going to be the devil that everyone says? Probably not. But Trump seems to be fueling. I'm not really into sensationalism, but it looks like it could get quite violent over there. You've got a lot of armed people that are very entrenched in their views, and there's a guy peddling stuff on Twitter left, right, and centre. I think it could get a bit bad. Yeah,
because did you hear about the plot to kidnap that governor, the head of, I think it's Michigan, Governor Whitmer? So there was this militia group that had fully armed, had a plan and everything, but the FBI stopped them. They were going to kidnap her. They had three different plans. One was to kidnap her and execute her. There was another that was to just storm there was loads of them as well. There'd be quite a big militia group. They were going to storm the Capitol buildings, like the governor buildings, and start executing them in the buildings, all the things. And they were all kind of MAGA crowd. It was, I think, the lockdowns fueled it, like because they didn't believe that the virus. They thought it was all a control, and they wanted the freedom against this control thing. So.
Well, the control thing, it confuses me a bit, because you've got people saying, "Oh, wearing my mask, taking my freedom." It's like, well, we can't walk down the street naked. We already have to wear clothes, so we're not that free. It's just a little bit of a mask, and it's not that much of a hindrance. But with the Trump stuff, I think the issue is as well, like he has, as much as an idiot as he is, sometimes he does good things. He does a lot of bad things. Sometimes he does good things. But you've got people on both sides, and the division gets worse because people just say every single thing he's ever done is ridiculous. And then other people say he's the Messiah and he needs to stay in office forever. It's just getting more and more divided. But with the science side of things then, how does it work? Because when you've got Trump that doesn't really seem to care about the virus too much, even though he got it. And in our country, there are people a bit lax, but the funding, that all comes from the government, doesn't it, for this research?
Some of it. There are a lot of private companies who are investing in it. So I think Operation Warp Speed in America, basically the government picked a few companies and said, we'll cover if your vaccine fails or for whatever reason, which a lot do. Like most kind of research fails, that they'll cover the losses. That's one reason why we've been able to get it out so fast, is because the government in America said that they'd take the losses of any failed vaccine trials. And also, so normally money is one of the biggest factors in money and risk in developing drugs. Because I used to work in clinical trials as well, so I know a bit about it. So they said that, well, normally you'd probably run one arm of a trial, kind of check if anything happened there, as to minimise your risk, because there's certain arms that you can run parallel to each other. So looking at in different populations, something we've been able to do is run kind of throw the financial risk of paying for these studies and it not coming to fruition. It's run 5 arms of a trial all at once. So 5 different studies within that trial. That was a big thing.
Whereas typically, when money was a focus and they were going to lose money, they wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest ones, is the financial risk's been taken away. That is.
Do you
probably...
think then so should the profit? Should there be a cap on the profit? If you've obviously, I know they can justify charging lots of money when they've invested all the upfront cost and the risk. But if the risk is reduced, do you think they should cap the profit margin?
I suppose that's a question for an economist. Obviously, you probably know my thoughts on kind of unabridged capitalism. Anyone who follows me on social media. Ideally, yeah, but if he gets the vaccine out quicker, they will. But yeah, I haven't really give it enough thought to answer conclusively.
You're sitting on the fence there.
Yeah.
I've got a few more things that I wanted to go over. So, your blog, Immunopolitics. It's give a bit of an intro first, and I'll ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah. So I started writing at the start of lockdown, just on different topics. Mostly politics and science related. They take quite a lot of research and alongside my own. So I've only got 3 out at the moment. I'm working on the fourth, so conspiratorial epidemiology. But I think I'm just going to, because I'm putting loads of research into that, I'm just going to try and get that published by an actual website. So I'm like trying to speak to some people to get that published. But yeah, I just started it during lockdown, and people seem to quite enjoy what I was putting out there.
I quite enjoy it. I think from the political point of view, you've just mentioned you're probably a bit more left leaning. Would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, quite. I'm probably not. I think, but there seems to be like we've seen people we both know saying that everyone that goes to university is turned into a Marxist, basically. I didn't really have much room to turn into a Marxist looking at commercial contracts. I don't know where that would have come in the lectures, but I'm not sure where you would have looking in a lab. I don't know where that would have happened. But there seems to be a bit of a thing that anyone that's gone to university and comes out is a lefty. But do you think that politics has played a big part in this current epidemic?
I mean, yeah, it's going to, especially at the start when we didn't really have the science. At that time, we didn't really know. So, in any sort of decision on a countrywide level is inherently political, whether it's on the side of science or not on the side of science. So it's hard to say. Like, I suppose it's always going to be political. But I think what we're seeing more is the problem of partisan political decisions, where there's a lot of issues we should just be united on that become like this side or that side. So especially like obvious ones are climate change. Luckily not so much here, but America, where everything is like, there's always two sides to an issue that there shouldn't really be.
Yeah, we all seem quite united on climate change in this country.
Yeah, generally, like there's definitely arguments of like it could be done faster, but yeah, you don't get as bad as America's just where to look at for extremes in everything. Yeah, so it's when at the moment things are a lot more partisan. Whether that's there's social conditions that kind of breed unrest, and partisan politics has happened. So like wage stagnation, especially since 2008, around the world, things got better for a very select group of people. So like the personal wealth of some of the billionaires is just insane, and whereas like everyone else's wages are stagnated, and that breeds these kind of unease and civil unrest, and like people are kind of becoming more ideological as a reaction to these, because I think we can all identify problems on the left and right. If you just want to put them on a spectrum, we can all identify that like people aren't having as good, like people's wages aren't going as far. It's just the kind of how we deal with it is people are really divided on that. So
yeah, I think most people have the same core hope that whichever side of politics, well, there are some psychos on both sides, but on the whole, I think everyone just wants the best for everyone else, but they've got different ideas of how that would happen. So like, I think across the globe, I'm reading a book at the moment, and it basically puts into figures the current, well, everything basically, and across the globe, on the whole, more people are entering what you'd say middle income. So across the globe, but in our country, obviously, the rich are getting a lot richer. Just seen by some of the top CEOs that are making a fortune when people are still working on minimum wage in those companies. But I don't know how that would. I think you've got to have a safety net for people, and you've got to try and make it fair. But I also think that maybe a strong economy lifts people up sometimes as well. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just not sure how. I'm sort of on the fence. I think I'm quite centre. I can't stand some of the stuff that I see some Tories saying. I can't stand some of the stuff that I see on the left. It's just I think most of the country's probably in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. But I think the idea that we seem to. Oh, I thought you froze. So the idea that some of the more left-leaning economic policies are damaging. So overall, just doesn't tend to be true. Like if people, because to get a strong economy, you need people spending.
Yeah.
So one of the best ways is to just give, like, poor people spend the most. They're not going to hold on to their income. So if you increase policies that give poor people more money, they put it back into the economy more.
But they could also get that through tax cuts potentially.
Yeah, but I mean their tax on their income is really low anyway.
Yeah.
I think maybe something like kind of negative income tax rates. So that's like top ups to a certain threshold, but that there's problems in that where it's kind of like corporate welfare. It justifies companies having low wages because the government will just pick up the slack. Universal basic income is the one that people seems to be the one that's kind of the most straightforward to implement and is hard to argue against because everyone gets like their £500, £1,000 a month to live. It's hard to argue against that because you've
especially if you remove the other, like the administration of the benefit system, for example, costs a fortune. If you had a flat rate and removed a lot of the other benefit type things, it could work out the same cost. Probably a lot more impact.
Yeah, definitely. And these kind of lefty policies actually do grow the economy more. Investing in green jobs is a good one. So like that, the green economy is going to be huge. I've started looking at shares for stuff like this. So this is. I'm not like a very good lefty now because I'm getting
looking
into
at
shares.
child mind lithium and stuff.
Yeah. Things like, so I'm looking at battery technology companies, and their shares have gone up so much. They're really good for the economy.
But I think there's a split though, isn't there, between left and right economics, and I think left and right social policy as well. Like I think it's just getting a bit crazy on that side of things as well. And I think there seems to be a bit of infighting in both sides now between, because you've got people that would say be left regarding economics, maybe not so left regarding certain other things. So I suppose the issue is when you've got two parties and you can only vote for one or the other, and I suppose Labour's not even that left wing really, is it?
Yeah, not in the kind of grand scheme of where it could be. I think this is where the culture wars have been really effective, because it finds issues that divide us online, that make us interact a lot online, and then the politician will wield that kind of divide people. So a good example is the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer. That is a partisan, should be a non-partisan issue. If you look at jails and things like that, incarceration rates are a lot higher. They're more likely to put in stop and search, 11 times more likely to be stop and search. That shouldn't be a partisan issue. But what we found divided us and became the issue was statues. So that entire movement, it all become this really, all the online conversations kind of only gravitate towards what gets a visceral reaction and gets the most engagement as a dividing issue, and the most arguments in the comments. And that became statues, and the whole movement was never about that. There was like the thing in Bristol, that was a local issue, and people have been campaigning for years down there. It'd been meant to, like the council was thinking about tearing it down anyway. That was a very local issue.
The thing about the statues gets me is people go, you're going to forget your history. It's like, we don't walk past statues of Hitler in Germany. We haven't forgot about him. But I think that this links all the way back to the virus and everything now, is that people don't take on views from both sides as well. So I think online, I got a bit, like some of my friends and people I know on both sides were going a bit mental online. So you had people on one hand saying that every single possible thing that could ever happen that was bad to somebody from the BAME community was the problem, the fault of the white person. And then you had people on the other side saying it's all your own issue, there's nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah. Whereas really, like you say, especially in America, you have underfunded schools because of the tax system, and you've got low property prices because they were prevented from getting mortgages until late 60s, I think it was. So there's no generational wealth. Obviously, less education leads to more crime leads to more incarceration, and then the cycle continues. But you've also got the sentences, which are a lot higher. There's quite a few examples of that. But in this country, people couldn't say, oh yeah, fair one, like maybe there is a bit of a glorification of gang culture, but there is an issue that needs addressing. They just say, oh, well, look at gang culture. And it's like, yeah, but that's not the whole issue, is it?
No.
It's probably the same with these vaccines. Oh, look, Bill Gates gave 6 people polio. It's like, yeah, but that's not the issue, is it?
Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah, I think, when we're online, it's only the issues that kind of divide people that drive engagement. And these have been kind of wielded by Trump, and the Brexit campaign kind of pioneered them. 2016 is like finding issues online, and like the social media culture war as like a really strong political tool.
But I think that once again was, I think there are very solid reasons not to like the EU, and I think there are very solid reasons to like the EU. But anyone that didn't like the EU was called a Nazi and a OAP, and anyone that did like the EU was called a lefty snowflake. And it was like, well, there are valid reasons. Like some countries in the EU aren't doing too well, and there are reasons for and against. But I just think everyone has got so partisan that it was just name calling. No one listened to the facts, and it's probably the same with COVID now. It's the same with everything. Is like people are picking a side and sticking to it, and not really listening to what other people could potentially say.
Yeah, but I guess there's probably the silent majority who do lie in the middle. It's just we only interact with the people who are being vocal.
Exactly.
So that's the problem, and then especially around cultural issues where there's not. It's a lot more complex than say some like hard science, even though those do manage to be partisan. Where like really complex historical or cultural issues, it's easy to just like divide people based on their internal biases. And I mean, they've just been kind of weaponized, all these culture wars.
On the Brexit front, what's happening with science funding? Because I saw, I think quite soon after, that they did secure quite a bit in British government funding, didn't they? Did they commit quite a lot?
I think so. Because we did. So when I was looking for my PhD, most of it tells you the funding, and like pretty much all of it was European. There was like a European money. I'm to be honest, I'm not too sure what's going on with the British science funding. I hope they match it the same, but I'm going to guess they probably.
Well, you think they would, because in theory, if they were putting the money in and they're not anymore, they should have the money left to commit the same amount. But,
yeah.
Well, we'll have to see. Well, what are you researching currently then? I know I've got a few little bits to put down. You mentioned, I'm not going to be able to pronounce them. Exosomes.
Exosomes, yeah.
Exosomes. Is that what you're researching currently?
Yeah. So the official title of my project is microRNA mediated activation of toll-like receptors 7 and 8. So
it's a mouthful.
Yeah. So toll-like receptors 7 and 8, they're viral sensing receptors. So they detect RNA sequences of viruses when they're inside the cell. Now, we found out that like the body's own RNAs sequences, so not messenger RNA, they're smaller ones, hence microRNA. They can activate these receptors, and the kind of what I'm looking at is this forming a kind of signaling network. So are cells that are maybe either being infected by viruses, are they recruiting immune system signaling by pushing out exosomes with so their own RNAs to activate the antiviral response through these two receptors?
And what's going to be the purpose of that? What if you find that that's the case?
So one thing, so we noticed some of these microRNAs are upregulated in cancer, not cancer, asthma. They are in cancer as well, but my focus is in the lungs. So there's ones we can identify that are upregulated in asthma sufferers. So it's whether we could, we're trying to understand why, because it's like an inflammatory response. It's like, see if we can identify which sequences of microRNAs are upregulated in asthma sufferers. So they've seen a few, but we're going to try and find like more.
And then if you find that, they're going to try and work on a cure for asthma, or am I jumping the gun there?
Probably, it's jumping the gun a bit, but it's one kind of building block in the wall. Like everyone's going to be doing these tiny small bits of asthma. It's very rare in science, like someone will just something. It's hundreds of studies. So it might be that we can use these to identify people with asthma before, like if we're unsure. So they're called biomarkers. So we could take a sample, but normally you'd know someone has asthma because they present with the symptoms. But
they can't breathe.
yeah. But there's different types of asthma. So there's like 5 different types. They all present with asthma. We're thinking about it more as a symptom of different things that are happening molecularly, rather than a disease that, like, you can't treat all those types of asthma the same way. So it might be that the microRNAs that I find, they're more active in certain specific types of asthma, which would change which steroids we give. So maybe we could use this in diagnosis of this, trying to like understand if it's that specific type of asthma. Then I've got this hypothesis that you can use the microRNAs that I look at in these new kind of mRNA vaccines, because they stimulate the immune system. We could add microRNAs into mRNA vaccines as something we call adjuvants. So they help recruit the immune system so that you produce more antibodies, because especially with cancer, so a really cool application with mRNA vaccines is against cancer. So we can design something that they're doing is like you take a biopsy of a cancer, look at what proteins are expressed on it compared to your healthy cells, get all the mRNAs for those proteins, and then put it into the mRNA vaccine. But it's specific against that individual's cancer. So it's so cool. And there's some good, they only started trials last year, but there's been some promising results for melanomas. So like reduced, out of 13 patients, reduced the size of the melanomas in 6 and created an immune response in all of them. So you could have
mental.
You'd have specific cancer vaccines. But the problem with cancer is that it kind of evades the immune system. So we need to find ways to like additionally boost the immune response past just showing the protein. So you need to add different things to like initiate the immune response. So that's my theory, is you could use some of the microRNAs I look at to these things to recruit more immune response and create stronger antibodies against the cancer or whatever disease you're looking at.
That's pretty crazy. Imagine if we could start doing that with like most things. You'd wipe out half the stuff that kills us.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of the vaccine scientists I follow and people, these mRNA vaccines are a huge breakthrough, like one of the biggest breakthroughs in medicine in quite a while. A lot of people are really excited, myself included, especially because it's kind of really relevant to my own field.
Yeah, exactly.
So it might be that there's a lot of other infectious diseases as well that we don't have vaccines to for whatever reasons. It's likely that we can now we've proved this technology works, we can much easily make these vaccines. They're a lot easier to make than traditional vaccines. You can scale them up quick. You can, it's a massive breakthrough.
Are these the ones where they have to be transported at a really low temperature, though?
Yeah, some of the formulations, it depends on how they've made their delivery system. So lipid nanoparticles, I think they have to be kept at -80. But Moderna, who's made the other one, theirs is -20. So I think they've got a more thermostable.
And that's based on this mRNA as well?
Yeah, that's another mRNA vaccine. There's also ones where the delivery system is an actual virus, where they kind of pull the genetic material out and put in the mRNA instead, but it's a monkey virus. So I think Oxford vaccine uses a monkey rhinovirus, where they take all the genetic material out of it basically and then put in their own, and then it self-replicates as well.
Don't let the conspiracy theorists hear that, Dan.
Yeah, this is the big problem, is some of the technology is quite, if it's like, it's got all the buzzwords of like nanoparticles and like gene therapies, and we are entering, this is the first kind of widespread, there are other approved gene kind of therapies, but this is the first widely used gene sort of therapeutic we're going to be looking at. So we are entering kind of a new age of gene, but it doesn't change our genes, it's just a genetic material based one. But yeah, we are entering a new age of genetic therapeutics.
Where we're going to live forever.
Maybe. That's theoretically possible.
I saw, I listened to a few people recently, but there's a lot of these rich people have doctors that are just specialists in just trying to make people live longer, and some of the stuff they're coming out with is pretty crazy. Like, if you've got the money at the moment, there's quite a few advances that are coming out. Yeah,
it's definitely. I mean, it's because part of aging is your telomeres kind of dropping off, and it's theoretically possible that we could kind of inhibit that process.
Yeah.
And live a lot longer.
But I've also seen peptides being researched at the moment that can potentially repair brain damage and things like that. And if you start going down that route, it's going to be crazy. Like the amount of people you could save. We get these vaccines for cancer, like you were talking about. You have maybe peptides that can reverse brain trauma and things like that. It'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah. Exosomes for stem cell exosomes are really interesting. So stem cell therapies, one problem is the kind of amount of stem cells that you have to inject into someone, and you get an immune response to them, even if it's their own kind of stem cells that can cause problems, but the actual exosomes that stem cells put out are just as effective at inducing regenerative properties in the target cells, because it like activates a certain downstream repair pathways in the target cells. So there's a lot of people in stem cell and regenerative medicine who are like taking stem cells but then just isolating the exosomes.
Would that be cheap to do on a large scale?
I think I'm not too sure. I think you'd have to, because I think at the moment you isolate the patient's own stem cells.
Yeah.
But I think actually, so this is the good thing about using exosomes is that you could have like a general source for them because they're not as immunogenic, because it's not like an entire cell.
So you could potentially have a batch ready to go in simple terms.
Yeah. I think that's the idea. But regenerative medicine, I've only watched a couple like seminars on that.
I mean, it's the future, isn't it? The way we're going, just got to get past COVID first.
Yeah.
But no, I'm looking forward to when the vaccine comes out, we get back to normal. But I'm just not sure if there's going to be much of an uptake, like I say. But yeah.
Yeah. This is where we just kind of need to really think about how we tackle these conspiracies and kind of get people in the middle, the vulnerable people, and prevent, not like vulnerable to COVID, but vulnerable to conspiracies for whatever reason, or like vaccine. They call it vaccine hesitant, so they're not anti-vaxxers, but they're just hesitant about this one. It's like
half the stuff that you said is hard to understand. So I don't know why people would be like, if you present them with all the facts, they still wouldn't know how to interpret it. So at some point, you're going to have to trust that somebody knows how to interpret it. If you told them all the things that go in a blue inhaler, they wouldn't know what they are. But they have to trust that someone's given them the blue inhaler to stop them having an asthma attack. I just think at some point, you've got to trust people to do it. But then again, I'm not sure it's maybe ethical to force them to have a vaccine, which they may have to go down the route of. Do you think the government would ever do that? Is that possible in science? I don't think they've ever done that before, have they? Child vaccines. You have to vaccinate a child, don't you? Or is that's not illegal?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I know in certain states in America they won't let like kids come to school unless they've like had measle jabs and things like that. Because last year we lost our it might have been 2016. We lost our measles-free status in the UK because of anti-vaccine movements, and now there's been there's over 1,000 cases of measles a year in the UK, which is quite worrying.
For something that we did eradicate.
Yeah. So something we had so low. So yeah, it is a problem. But then I think equally when people see the kind of damage of like infectious diseases, especially if like someone they knew, like a kid had measles and they could see how horrible it is, then it reminds them of why.
I think that's the thing. When you're removed from the outcome of this, you're not like someone working in an ICU ward is going to be much more scared of COVID than somebody that's never seen anybody with COVID or heard of it. So if you're removed from it and then all you're getting is your information from certain sources on both sides as well, like obviously maybe an ICU nurse may be too scared of it because that's all she sees, or maybe someone that doesn't. Do you know what I mean? I think we're also going to make sure we're getting our sources from decent places and actually understanding what's a real source and what's not.
Yeah. We need to teach people like the pyramid of evidence of like which Facebook is at the very bottom.
Shouldn't be on the pyramid because the amount of stuff that it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
saying that, I mean, because I do my posts on like sort of psych-harm to try and like break it down. I suppose you've just got to try and trust that source on that platform. and kind of it's hard. But I'll cover this in my conspiratorial epidemiology, is like how we develop a societal immune system against conspiracies, and tackling like poverty is a big one. So like poverty linked with poor education, kind of intertwined. Tackling those issues. I do think we really should teach philosophy just for all the rational. There's a lot of like looking at rational thought and how we form arguments and things like that in philosophy.
Yeah.
So I think teaching that is really important.
100%.
Like,
I agree with that. I think people don't know how to process things, but also on the other side is you'd have to be open to understand that maybe sometimes there are things that are dodgy, because you can't obviously say everything's conspiracy, because we all know what people are like. So it's just finding the balance of how to assess that, and maybe just taking a small snippet without a big picture isn't going to give you a very good view.
Yeah, definitely.
But where can people find you, Dan?
So I'm on Twitter. That's Daniel Dimmock 2. Don't look for Daniel Dimmock 1, because
he's an imposter.
It's actually like a QAnon conspiracy account.
No.
Yeah. It's like it's either a bot account or something. It says like military veteran.
The Russians.
Like the Russians. Daniel Dimmock 2 on Twitter. Immunopolitics for my .wordpress. So if you just Google Immunopolitics WordPress, that should come up. And then those are like my public kind of engagement ones.
You keep the other ones private for now.
Yeah.
Until you found the thing to cure asthma and cancer and all that lot. Winning your Nobel Prize for Science or whatever it is. But,
fingers crossed.
Thanks for coming on, Dan. It's been good. Covered quite a lot of topics. And make sure to check out Immunopolitics. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe and share with your friends. If you're a new listener, please go back and check out our old podcast. We've got some great stuff in there from people in many fields, such as martial arts, business, ex-special forces guys, authors, the list goes on. So please head back and check it out. We also have some very interesting guests lined up, so make sure to stay tuned. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.